Nandana Rajajana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Rajajana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Rajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Manachari Yamuna Tira Yanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Gopijana Varapa Jaya Kiri Varadari Jaya Kiri Varadari Gopijana Varapa Jaya Kiri Varadari Jaya Kiri Varadari Yashoda Nandana Rajajana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Rajajana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Manachari Yamuna Tira Manachari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tojayam Udirayat Nastapareshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. Reading from the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 5. Vidura's talks with Maitreya, verse number 26. Kala Vidya tu Mayayam Guna Mayam Adhoksaja Prushenatma Bhutena Viryam Adata Viryavan. Kala Vidya tu Mayayam Guna Mayam Adhoksaja Purshenatma Bhutena Viryam Adata Viryavan. Kala Vidya tu Mayayam Guna Mayam Adhoksaja Prushenatma Bhutena Viryam Adata Viryavan. One more. No? Yes? Kala, the eternal time. Bhtya, by the influence of. Tu, but. Mayayam, in the external energy. Gunamayam, in the qualitative modes of nature. Adhoksaja, the transcendence. Purushena, by the Purusha incarnation. Atma Bhutena, who is the plenary expansion of the Lord. Viryam, the seeds of the living entities, adata, impregnated, viryavan, the supreme living being. The supreme living being in his feature as the transcendental Purusha incarnation, who is the Lord's plenary expansion, impregnates the material nature of three modes, and thus, by the influence of eternal time, the living entities appear. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada, ISKCON's founder Acharya. The offspring of any living being is born after the father impregnates the mother with semen. And the living entity floating in the semen of the father takes the shape of the mother's form. Similarly, mother material nature cannot produce any living entity from her material elements unless and until she is impregnated with living entities by the Lord Himself. That is the mystery of the generation of the living entities. This impregnating process is performed by the first Purusha incarnation, Karno Vashayi Vishnu. Simply by his glance over material nature, the whole matter is accomplished. We should understand the process of impregnation. We should not understand the process of impregnation by the personality of Godhead in terms of our conception of sex. The omnipotent Lord can impregnate just by His eyes, and therefore He is called all-potent. Each and every part of His transcendental body can perform each and every function of the other parts. This is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita, chapter 5, verse 32. Angani yasya sakalendriya vrityamanti. In Bhagavad Gita, chapter 14, verse 3, also, the same principle is confirmed. Mama yonir mahad brahma, tasmin garbham dadamyaham. When the cosmic creation is manifested, the living entities are directly supplied from the Lord. They are never products of material nature. Thus, no scientific advancement of material science can even produce a living being. That is the whole mystery of the material creation. The living entities are foreign to matter, and thus they cannot be happy unless they are situated in the same spiritual life as the Lord. The mistaken living being, out of forgetfulness of his original condition of life, unnecessarily wastes time trying to be happy, to become happy in the material world. The whole Vedic process is to remind one of this essential feature of life. The Lord offers the conditioned soul a material body for his so-called enjoyment. But if one does not come to his senses and enter into spiritual consciousness, The Lord again puts him in the unmanifested condition as it existed in the beginning of the creation. The Lord is described here as Viryavan, or the greatest potent being, because he impregnates material nature with innumerable living entities who are conditioned from time immemorial. Om Jnana-timirandasya Janandana Shalakaya Chakshuramitam Nyena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stabhinam Nyena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Gadamayam Tati Svapanantiham Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yukta Bharakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagujatam Sagana Raganadan Vidam Dam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Varijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vidamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Jayadam Suritopangor Mama Madama Tergati Matsar Vasva Padam Bojo Radha Madana Mohano Dibyad Bindaranya Kalpa Drumada Śrīmad Ratnagara Sringasanasto Śrīmad Radha Shilagovinda Devo Pistalabi Savyamano Smarami Śrīman Rasarasarambi Vamsi Bhattatastita Karshan Venu Svanar Gopir Gopinata Striyestuna Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Brindavaneshvari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Prana Mahi Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubyascha Kripasandubhyeva-cha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Kala Vritya Tumayayam Guna Mayam Adhoksaja Prushenatma Bhutena Viryam Adata Viryavan. The Supreme Living Being in his feature as the transcendental Purusha incarnation, who is the Lord's plenary expansion, impregnates the material nature of three modes, and thus by the influence of eternal time, the living entities appear. For those of us who are diligently engaged in practicing devotional service with the aim of perfecting it, sadhana bhakti, siddha bhakti, prema bhakti, this information is to overall certainly increase our transcendental love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, while at the same time, because our, saying it in the most nice way, why we're in this material world, to render service to the Lord in the form of, as was described earlier in the second canto, the Lord is very eager to spread his party, the Brahma Sampradaya, and every member of this party to date is engaged in what is the main activity of the Brahma Sampradaya? Yes, well, that is the method, but the overall is to distribute Krishna consciousness. Preaching is the essence, yes. One and the same. Good answer. There was a joke made by the comedian in the 1930s, Groucho Marx. He said that I would be very suspicious of any organization that would admit me as a member. You get the humor? I'll say it again. I would be very suspicious of any organization that would admit me as a member. No, I guess it went over your head, the humor.
How about the 2020?
No. So people join various organizations, and the organization has some goal or some aim or some reason that others would want to join. So quite to the opposite of said Groucho Marx, that anyone who joins the Lord's party, not only completely the opposite, they should be suspicious, they should be extremely eager to also become a member of that party, because that is the party of reality, as was described in the second part of today's purport. The living entities are foreign to matter, and thus they cannot be happy unless, it's described earlier in this purport, in terms of material nature cannot produce any living entity from her material elements unless, and what is the other word? I'll give you a hint. It also starts with the letter U. That's right. Good listener. Unless and until she's impregnated by the Lord himself. Unless and until they are situated in the same spiritual life as the Lord. One important note, as Srila Prabhupada would say of his spiritual master, who had so many temples all throughout India, some 64 branches of the Gaudiya Math, he said that if, for the cost and endeavor of all the temples, I could turn one man to Krishna consciousness, I would consider the whole effort a complete success. In other words, Srila Prabhupada was saying that it is very, 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 very difficult to take even one living entity out of the, and this is a term that Prabhupada would use a lot, clutches of material nature. I don't know if anyone has ever had the experience of being in the clutches of something very undesirable. And think of like a cartoon or a movie where the eagle or the big giant dinosaur pterodactyl has the hapless victim's head and is being clutched. Very difficult to get out of very powerful clutches. And what is the main clutch that is clutching the living entities in this material world, keeping them here? The shackle of sex life. Shackle and clutches is synonymous. Prabhupada describes in the first canto in regards to encouraging The sadhana bhaktas, Prabhupada says in another place, those just on the threshold of the house of bhakti, to become restless in association of wealth and women is not at all a astonishment, because one has been associated with these things from a very remote time, practically since time immemorial, and it takes time to recover from the foreign atmosphere. So this is a foreign atmosphere. The living entities are foreign to matter, and thus they cannot be happy unless and until they are situated in the same spiritual life as the Lord. So as we were saying at the beginning, we are approaching Krishna directly, Govindam, Adi Purusham, Tamaham Bhajami. We were saying every day during the month of Kartik that we do not wish even to know the Lord's feature of Paramatma. There's Karnadakshay Vishnu, Garbhadakshay Vishnu, and Paramatma is Shiradakshay Vishnu. I simply wish that your childhood pastimes may constantly be enacted within my heart. My dear mother, my elder brother Balaram was fighting and arguing with me today, so he conspired with my other boyfriends to lie that I've actually eaten dirt. And Krishna's accusing his Priyanamasakas, his dearmost boyfriends, coward boyfriends, as being liars. One should never consider the Lord's personal associates, the coward boys, to be ordinary boys speaking lies. But they've achieved this position, Krita Punya Punja, after countless lifetimes of performing pious activities. Well, let me open your mouth and let me see. You can hear the memoir of Bharadvaj Prabhu. How on earth am I going to paint this painting for the Krishna book that Prabhupada wanted? So if you have the Krishna book trilogy as it was printed first in 1970 and then again reprinted in 1974, you can see this beautiful painting, which is, I still believe, it's either in Montreal or in the Davis Adan Fisher Mansion. A lot of original artwork in both places. So the entire cosmic manifestation in all detail, Mother Yashoda saw within the mouth of the Lord. But Krishna allowed that to be seen by Mother Yashoda momentarily, but the power and strength of a pure Vatsalya parental bhav simply overwhelmed. You see, Bhukti, Mukti, Siddhi, Kami. We want to be free from desires for karma, jnana, and mystic yoga. Wow! You can see, man, that's far out. You know, Prabhupada comes, everybody's taking LSD. They want to have some type of cosmic consciousness, cosmic awareness, see something wonderful, parade around in the street like there's some type of grand, high, exalted hoo-ha, you know, that they've seen the light. This is all nonsense. Mother Yashoda didn't want anything to do with any of that I'm seeing the whole cosmic manifestation. She just discounted it. Like, I must be having like some type of something. She simply wanted to love her transcendental son, Krishna. Yashoda Nandana, Braja Jana Ranjana. That's all. Prabhupada says in one purport, one must rise above all this to be situated in pure and simple spiritual life.
They cannot be happy unless they are situated in the same spiritual life as the Lord. How many times would Prabhupada say the goal is to go back home, back to Godhead, to associate with Krishna, to eat with Krishna, dance with Krishna? So that same Krishna, for the sake of material creation, which Prabhupada summarily describes in another place, not very glorious or gratifying description, supplying naughty boys with playing cradles. Or as in the Big Fish, Little Fish comedic play that's put on by devotees to illustrate the futility of trying to take Krishna's position. There is a place I can send you where you can try to be God, but you won't be happy there. I promise you. You won't be happy. The mistaken living being, out of forgetfulness of its original condition of life, unnecessarily wastes time trying to become happy in the material world. Prabhupada says in another place, no one has anything, actually also in this third canto, no one has anything else to do except render pure devotional service to the Lord. That is a very profound statement, and if you meditate on it and gain realization of that, then you won't be affected by this idea that, well, everybody's whatever it is they're doing, going to the club, going to the movie house, going to the disco dance, boys and girls and all of that stuff. All of that has nothing to do with reality. So simply the Lord, the devotees, the Shastra, this is the only thing that's taking place on this planet. And the more that we are convinced 100% that without Krishna I cannot be happy, to that degree of our faith and conviction, we will be able to convince others of the same. Because the devotee, he understands that everyone is just like himself, as it's described in the Bhagavad Gita. What's happiness for himself is happiness for others in Krishna consciousness. And what's distressful for oneself is distressful to others. One should remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. This principle is the basis for all other rules and regulations. The whole Vedic process is to remind one of this essential feature of life. The Lord offers the conditioned soul and material body for his so-called enjoyment. So-called. It's not enjoyment, it's actually all distress. And in the third canto, it's described that the so-called feeling, third chapter of Bhagavad Gita, so-called feeling of happiness the conditioned soul, or the sense enjoyer has, is actually his worst enemy. So how to always be fixed in this vision without wavering even the slightest? One must has to awaken his dormant love of Godhead and always be situated in that. That is what the Yuga Dharma of chanting Hare Krishna leads to, sure and certain. Prabhupada, in the very beginning, didn't introduce very many rules and regulations, hardly at all. You hear the memoirs of devotees, especially in San Francisco, New York was a little more, Prabhupada was a little more able to, devotees like Guru Das, Shama Sundar, Rāma Rāya, etc., etc., Prabhupada Memories, Siddhanta. What was the main program? Chanting Hare Krishna and Kirtan and distributing prasad. Especially in San Francisco, because the lifestyle was to, take hallucinogenic and psychotropic drugs and stay up all night tripping. And the natural result is that you come down from such tripping and, whatever is your mental state, which a lot of times isn't very good, but you're starving. So when it came to be known that the Hare Krishna Temple at 513 Frederick Street was giving out free breakfast, oh boy, did they have a huge crowd of all-night tripping hippies came there to take use of that, not just free food, like the people handing out, come on the subway car, here you go, anybody hungry? And they'll give you like some Twinkies or some, sandwich that has some horrible meat in it or something. But, cooked with love and devotion and offered to Krishna Prasadam. And these activities purified to such an extent, what to speak of in the presence of such a great personality as His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada, many people became very, very quickly purified and became very strong and exemplary devotees by such treatment. You hear at Brahmananda, Prabhupada didn't even instruct it. Prabhupada said, Swamiji, can we clean up? Yes, you can clean. And then Prabhupada would teach them how to clean. Swamiji, can we, cook for you? Yes. And then he instructed how to cook. Even Prabhupada, there's a story in San Francisco, Guru Das, Jayananda, some others. There's the first Gaur Pranim in ISKCON. Gaur Pranim 1966, you can read in Prabhupada's diary, I am alone, while the devotees in Navadvip Mayapur are celebrating Lord Chaitanya's birthday. So the idea, just like in Janmashtami, you sit in the temple all day and try to chant 64 rounds. And everyone is so restless. So they just decided, why don't we just go out and have kirtan in the street? And they did. They became ecstatic. And then they went to Prabhupada's apartment, which is nearby the San Francisco Frederick Street Temple. And Prabhupada came to the window, and Prabhupada, everybody look at me, went like this. And in India, when you do like that, that means come here. Right, Arjunananda? So they thought that Prabhupada was saying, oh, this is very bad, get back in the temple. And then they all looked down-faced and like, oh my God, we made some offense here. Prabhupada told us to stay in the temple all day, and we went out. And then the servant came out and said, no, Prabhupada wants you to come in here. And Prabhupada, and they came and said, you have discovered, they said, this is very significant, that you have discovered that going on Sankirtan in public, going out in the street, you've discovered this on Lord Chaitanya's birthday. This is very significant. Now I order you to do this every day. Hari Bol. The whole Vedic process is to remind one of this essential feature of life. The Lord offers the conditioned soul and material body for his so-called enjoyment. Narottam Das Thakur, he says, in praying to his spiritual master, Srila Lokanath Goswami, by your mercy, this body, mind, and life will at last know perfection. Prabhupada told to Bhavananda, who was part of Andy Warhol's scene here in New York City. You can imagine. Look it up in the Wikipedia what Andy Warhol was, if those of you don't know that. And Prabhupada said that you were all devotees in your last life, and by Lord Chaitanya's order and arrangement, you've all taken your birth here to come forward to assist me in this great mission. And Bhavananda rightfully protested the type of lifestyle he was engaged in previously. But Prabhupada, we were engaged in so many sinful and horrible activities, and Prabhupada said, that was simply circumstantial. When I called, you all came running. So this is what it means: only by the mercy of a pure devotee can one get Krishna. All of our demerits, all of our disgraces are erased. The caste Goswamis, Jata Gosai, unless one is born in a high-class Brahmin, one cannot practice the Vedic system. There's a story that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati tells called Naked Pencho. Once upon a time, as it is understood, in tropical lands, little children go naked. And there's nothing wrong in this until a certain age. Now, there was a little boy, and his name was Pencho, and he used to go naked all the time. But then when he became of school age, wasn't naked anymore, he excelled very much in his studies. Now, there was a problem that Pencho's father was a very good and exemplary person, and his neighbors became envious of him. So naturally, that envy descended down to his son, Pencho. So whenever, information of Pencho's advancement in studies and getting the highest honors, they all became angry and just turned green in envy. You ever see a cartoon where the person turns green in envy? Like that. So then later, he went to university and became a top lawyer afterwards. Then he became the district magistrate. Then he became the most honorable judge in the whole province. And when this was told to the neighbors, they were all saying, oh, these are all false stories, And then when it was actually shown to them, his name on authentic government documents and court records, they said, well, he must be working and not getting any salary then, because he's just a naked Pencho. So the idea is that once one comes to the devotional service of the Lord, being accepted by the bona fide spiritual master, to refer to their previous sinful life is a great, is very, very sinful thing to do. To refer to the honorable district court magistrate is simply a naked Pencho. So this is the glory and beauty of devotional service, and how we can perfect this life and this body by simply engaging it in the devotional service of the Lord. That's what it means to come to one's senses. And if one does not come to his senses and enter into spiritual consciousness, the Lord again puts him in the unmanifested condition as it existed in the beginning of the creation. So, bhutva praliyate, again and again, huge amount of time, billions of years in the body of the Mahavishnu. Prabhupada says, one should remember all these partial and total annihilations. And we're just thinking, will I make it to the end of this life, or even the end of this Kali Yuga? How many Kali Yugas are there in Mahakalpa. What's the number? How many Kali Yugas in one breathing of Mahavishnu? 71? 360. Okay. So anyway, we're drawing a blank. So what to speak of, we want to get out before Kali Yuga is over. Prabhupada talking with Allen Ginsberg in Columbus, Ohio. Where is Hari? He'd be like a big fan of hearing this. That at the end of Kali Yuga, Allen Ginsberg, what will have happened to all of your disciples by the end of Kali Yuga? And Prabhupada just immediately, without hesitation, by then, they've all long time since been back home, back to Godhead. Jai Prabhupada. But what happens at the end of Kali Yuga? Allen Ginsberg asked. At the end of Kali Yuga, I will eat you, and you will eat me. That's all. Just simply cannibalistic barbarism. So what to speak of the entire Mahakalpa? And even you don't get it right in a Mahakalpa, then another Mahakalpa. What is it described? I push them further and further away to the point where they'll never, there's no such thing as never, but in terms of the fantastic amount of time and beyond our calculation of years, that's what demoniac mentality and action leads to. And finally, it's concluded describing the very nice term or name for the Lord, Viryavan. The Lord is described here as Viryavan, or the greatest potent being, because he impregnates material nature with innumerable living entities or conditioned from time immemorial. Kala Vritya Tumayayam Gunamayam Adhoksaja Purushena Mabhutena Viryam Adata Viryavan. The Supreme Living Being in his feature as the transcendental Purusha incarnation, who is the Lord's plenary expansion, impregnates the material nature of three modes, and thus by the influence of eternal time, the living entities appear. Hare Krishna. Any questions or comments? Grantaraj Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Radha Govinda ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanandi Hari